Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio. So far with our NPC dialogue, we've got a bunch of pieces. We've got a nice looking dialogue canvas, we've got an NPC who has a talk state, but so far there's no conversation. So where exactly are we headed this time around? Well, first of all, we're going to create two scriptable objects. One is going to be for our actors. This will allow us to be able to store dynamically the actor's portrait and name. We'll also have a dialogue scriptable object where we'll make a customizable DialogueLine class that will allow us to write as many lines of dialogue as we want for each conversation that includes both the name, portrait, as well as the text for each line of dialogue. That's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. Alright, so first off, a quick note on scriptable objects. This is a different type of script which will not inherit from mono behavior, and instead is a data storing class, which allows us, in our case, to store the actor portrait and name. So let's go ahead and create a new C# script. We'll call this actor SO for scriptable object. Now once we get in here, we can go ahead and get rid of the start and update method, and let's just make our variables. We're going to need a public string, which will store our actor name. We're also going to need a public sprite for the portrait. At this point, we can come up here, and since we're not inheriting from mono behavior, we can instead make this inherit from scriptable object. Let's just get rid of these extra using lines we don't need, and then we're just going to add a new header here, which is going to be create asset menu. First is the file name. Let's just call it actor SO. And then we're also going to need a menu name. Let's save that and pop into Unity. Now before we go any further, let's just stay organized here. So I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one Actor SOs. Now when we get inside there, we can go create, and we've got a new dialogue option and NPC. When we click that, it'll just make a new file called Actor SO, and we're going to make one of these for every actor in our game. So I'll make one for Purple Bob. We'll make sure to give him a name and also our sprite. In this case, for the portrait, we're just going to use the same sprite that we did for his idle animation. As you'll remember in the earlier video when we set up our UI, we actually set it up to work really nicely with that image, so we don't need any special portrait image here. Though if you've developed those, you can use them as well. I'm actually just going to make a second one here so that when we set up our dialogue in just a moment, I'll have two people to use. I'll just make this one Night Runner. I'll put in that name, and here, since this is going to represent our knight, I'm just going to grab the warrior blue. All right, we've created our first data structure. Now let's go ahead and make the one that's a little more fun, the actual dialogue itself. So we'll create a new C# script and call this one Dialogue SO. When we get inside here, we can once again get rid of the start and update methods. I'm just going to reduce this so that we just have our using Unity engine at the top. Let's go ahead and create the asset menu right at the beginning this time. Our file name for a new one will just simply be Dialogue SO. And our menu time this time, once again, will start with dialogue, but then let's just add dialogue node. Now next up, we're going to do something fun. We're going to create a new public class here called DialogueLine, and this is almost like making our own variable types. So first, we'll just make two variables, a actor SO called the speaker, and also a string for the dialogue text. Now, I don't just want a tiny little box, I want to have lots of room, so let's make a text area here. And I'm just going to specify that the minimum number of lines for this to display will be 3 and the max will be 5, which just sets the size of our box. Now I want these dialogue lines to be serializable, meaning I want to be able to see them in the inspector in Unity. So here we're just going to add system.serializable up at the top. With that done, all we need to do for the code in this dialogue scriptable object is just make a public dialogue line array and call it lines. And don't forget that this is a scriptable object, so we need to take out that mono behavior inheritance reference and make sure we put scriptable object in there. All right, back in Unity, let's just continue to think about organization here. So we'll create a new folder called Dialogue SOs, and I'll also create a new folder which will just be for our NPC states. That way we can drag all of this state logic inside of there. Let's just drag the actor scriptable object script into the folder and do the same for dialogue. Now when we go in that dialogue folder, we can right-click, go to create, and you'll notice that in dialogue, we now have the dialogue node option, which will create our first dialogue scriptable object. Ultimately, you'll want to come up with a good naming structure, as you could have thousands of these in a decent-sized game, but for now, I'm just going to call this one Greeting with Bob. I'll make this dialogue say have 3 lines, and now we can just go in and customize it. I can type in the speaker, say Purple Bob, and then give him something to say. I can then continue to do this, moving to our next element where Purple Bob says a little more, and then finish up with Night Runner responding. Just like that, we've created our first dialogue, and while this is a little anticlimactic, we'll get everything hooked up in the next video so that we can have this displaying on our canvas and have it triggered by actually talking to the NPC. I hope to see you in that video. Until then, this is Matt with Night Run Studio. Cheers.